Alright, welcome back to a brand new video. So in this video, we're going to go ahead and set up the Express API for our Discord dashboard. Okay, now keep in mind that Next.js, which is the framework that we're using to build out the whole user interface, even though it does run on the server side and has its own API layer, we're not going to be using that. Okay, there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to use the built-in API layer for larger applications, and that's exactly why I'm not using it. And we're going to be building a completely separate API using the Express framework. So let me go ahead and create a new folder, and I'll call this Next Discord or Next Dashboard API. And I'm going to cd into this folder now, and I'm going to go ahead and set up our project. So I'm going to type yarn init-y. If you prefer to use npm, you're more than welcome to do that. Doesn't really matter. I just prefer yarn. Now what we're going to do is we're going to install a couple of dependencies. So I'll start off by installing TypeScript as a dev dependency. So yarn add -d TypeScript. I'm also going to install a couple more, such as .env, which we're going to use for environment variables. So let me just install that. Okay, and you can see that we have our package.json file, we have our dev dependencies right over here, and we have node modules folder. Let me go ahead and install a couple of more that we'll need. So let me install TS node, which is just going to be a node interpreter for TypeScript. Okay, we're going to install nodemon. Okay, and nodemon is going to be used to run our application in dev mode. Whenever we make changes, it's going to restart the process for us, so we don't have to manually do it. Let me also install types for Express because we are using TypeScript, and that's going to be it. Let me go ahead into... oh wait, I forgot to install one more thing. Most importantly, forgot to install Express, but not as a dev dependency. So notice how I just type yarn add express, no -d. -d just basically installs it as a dev dependency. Okay? Let's go back into our package.json file. Let's create a scripts property. And we're going to set up some dev scripts as well as some start scripts. So if we start with the start script, this is basically just going to be the script that we're going to run in production mode. So we're going to use the node command. And we have to pass in the compiled JavaScript file, the main file that is going to be running. So that file is going to live inside the dist folder, which is what we're going to which is the folder that we're going to have all of our TypeScript code compiled into. Okay? And the file name is going to be called index.js because we are creating a file called index.ts inside the source folder, which is going to be the main file. That's the entry point to our application. Let's create a dev script, and we're just going to use the nodemon command, which we installed locally. But if you have it installed globally, it also works fine too. And we'll pass in the file, which is just source index.ts. And I'll set up a build script as well, which is just going to be tsc, which is the TypeScript compiler command. All right, so now we need to also create a tsconfig file because we're using TypeScript. So if you don't have TypeScript installed globally, but you just installed it locally, you can actually run the local TypeScript, the local tsc command. You can see that the binary is installed inside this bin folder, .bin folder, inside the node modules folder. So you can just use yarn or npx and then the name of the binary. So for me, I'll do yarn and then we'll do tsc and then the flag --init, and this will create a tsconfig file. The only thing that I'm going to modify inside this tsconfig is the outdir. We're going to uncomment this and set the path to be /dist. So this is where all of our TypeScript code is going to be compiled into, this /dist folder. Okay? So if I create a new folder called source, let's create a new file called index.ts, and let's run the build script right now. You're going to see that that dist folder is going to generate, and it's going to have one file, index.js, which is going to be the main file that we're going to run in production. Because you obviously don't want to use nodemon in production mode, especially you don't want to, have your TypeScript file, being interpreted and running the server, because it's a lot slower than actual JavaScript. Okay, even though JavaScript is itself slow, but using TypeScript is obviously going to add more complexity. Anyways, that was a short ramble. Let's go ahead and set up the project now. So we did install the .env package. So let me create a .env file. And this is where we're going to define environment variables such as the port, any client credentials for Discord application, any other secret keys we might need. We're going to store this inside here. And you usually want to make sure that this file is not staged or committed to Git. Okay. So let me go ahead, unless you know that the project's always going to be private. Okay, but let's go ahead and set the port. So this is the only environment variable we'll set for now. And let me go inside index.ts. Let's import Express first. Okay, and then we're going to create a new instance by just calling the Express function, because this is a function, so we don't have to so we're not actually using the new keyword to create this instance. We're just calling this function, which is going to return an Express instance. Okay, let's go ahead and create a variable called port, and the value of this is going to be process.env.port or port 3001. Okay, so this is going to read the environment variable. So I'm going to go ahead and import config from .env and call config. Okay, so what this does is it'll actually just load up all of the environment variables. All right, and keep in mind that if you have a port environment variable set on your actual operating system, it will not use this value. It's going to use whatever value you have set on your actual operating system. But for some reason, if this value is undefined, we'll just use 3001, which is pretty fair. Okay, so now let's go ahead and set up our server to listen to requests. So I'm actually going to create a main function. Okay, and basically we're just going to call this function. And this is kind of like a bootstrap function. And the reason why we're doing this is because in case we need to use, await to do whatever, like connect to a database, we'll do that inside an async function. If you're using ES 2022, you can actually use top level await, but we're not going to configure that for this project. So let's go ahead and wrap this in a try catch now. In case any error happens, we can log it to the console. I always want to make sure you're handling these errors. And we'll go ahead and call app.listen, pass in the port. And we'll go ahead and pass in a callback function. And we'll just say running on port. Okay. I'm also going to add one more thing. I'm also just going to add another console log and just tell the user what environment we're running in. So on my operating system, I have an environment variable called development. So let me just do running in. Okay, and this is just great to kind of like know which environment you're in. So on the production server, if you have the environment set to production, you can easily just you'll know, like, it's running in production, and it'll use all of the production environment variables that are set. But you don't have to do this, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and run our application. Let's make sure that it works. Always good to do that. So let's run yarn dev, and if you're using npm, you do npm run dev. You can see that we're running in development mode. And we're listening on port 3001, which is good. Okay, that's a good sign. So we know that the server is up and running, as you can see right over here. Cool. All right, so that's pretty much it when it comes to setting up the server. Of course, we do need to set up other stuff too, such as all the middleware, like cores, body parser, and sessions and stuff. We'll do that in the next video. Before I end this video, let me go ahead and just set up our file structure real quick. So we're going to be using routers, which is just going to make our application way more modular. So instead of registering all of our endpoints inside, this index.ts file, like app.get / we're going to go ahead and use routers. Okay, so I'm going to create a new folder, call this routes, and I'm going to create an index.ts file. Okay, now we are going to have multiple routers because think about it, we're going to have an endpoint called /auth, which is where all users are going to authenticate to. We're going to have an endpoint for getting all of the guilds. We're going to have an endpoint to get all of the guild / commands, right? So we're going to create individual routers for each path. Okay, it's a good way to make your application way more modular instead of just defining everything at the app level. So what we'll do is I'm going to create a new folder called auth, and I'll create a new file called index.ts. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and import the router from the Express package. And we can create an instance of this router the same way that we do with the Express app. So const router equals router. You just call it, it's just a function. And I'm going to go ahead and export this as a default export. Okay. Let me go ahead and set up a quick route real quick. We'll set up a get route. Now, one thing that I should mention is that every single route that we're going to register at this auth router will be prefixed with /auth. Okay. So that way we don't actually have to prefix it ourselves inside this router. We're going to do it somewhere else. Okay. So let me go ahead and just send a 200 back. So when we visit this endpoint, we have to visit /auth. But we are going to prefix it with /API, so all routes will be prefixed with /API. Okay, so I'm going to exit the index.ts file inside the auth folder. We're going to go inside this index.ts file outside of the auth folder. So this is just going to be the main router. This is going to take every single router, okay, and it's just going to register it and prefix it with the resources endpoint. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import this router. So we'll call this import. Well, first let's import a router. Okay, and let's create a router as well. And let me just copy and paste this as well. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and call router.use. And we're going to use the /auth endpoint with this auth router. So we're going to need to import auth router from ./auth. And because the file is index.ts, it'll just look for that file. So this is the router over here that's being exported as a default export. So what I can do now is I can pass in this router as an argument, as the second argument. Okay, so router.use /auth router. So this is how we configure this auth router to get prefixed with the /auth route or the /auth prefix. Okay, now we're not done yet. We haven't actually registered this main router, which is what we're going to do next. Okay, because right now, if I try to go to that route, if I try to go to /auth, it's not going to work. Okay, and even if I try to go /API/auth, it's not going to work. So let's go inside index.ts. We're going to go. Let's see, inside over this main function. And I'm actually going to do this. I'm actually going to create another function called create app. And I'm going to have this function return an instance of Express app. I'm going to be a little bit extra. Like this. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create this and we'll just return app. Okay, and so this function will basically just set up our app. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Let me just go over here. Const app equals create app. All right, let's see what's going on here. Oh wait, hold on. Let me also import the Express interface. Right over here. All right, there we go. It's not express.application, it's just Express. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to go over here. Well, first let's import the main router. So this index.ts file, let's import that. So I'll just call this routes and we'll import this from routes. Okay. So this is the main router that has every single router configured. So we're going to take that. And inside the create app function, we'll call app.use, and we're going to pass in as a string the path. Okay, so this is going to be the global prefix if you think about it. So every single endpoint that is going to be registered with our router is going to be prefixed with /API. Okay, and that is literally it. So now, if I go into our browser, if I go to /API/auth, you're going to see we get an OK. All right, so think of it like this. We just registered all of our routes with the /API endpoint, okay? And that /auth endpoint is configured at the router level. Okay, so over here, inside the main router, we register our router to be prefixed with /auth. If I change to something else, if I change this to authentication, okay? If I change this to authentication, Let me actually use Postman for this so you can see the address bar a little bit better. So if I did /API/authentication, you're going to see that it goes, okay, if I try to visit auth, it's not going to work. So whatever value you pass in for this router.use will register this auth router. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing for all the other routers that we create. Okay, and keep in mind that, again, as I mentioned before, we don't have to prefix these routes with /auth or /authentication because they already are prefixed with it. Okay, and then finally, we just register all of the routes with /API. Okay, the reason why I'm being very descriptive about everything is because it's important that we establish some proper file structure and proper code structure so that way our code does not get super messy. Okay, so hopefully this all makes sense. And what we're going to do in the next video is we're going to set up all of the other middleware. We're going to set up sessions, we'll set up session stores, and then we'll also set up Passport as well for authentication. Okay, and we'll also set up all of the other mandatory stuff like course and stuff. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Peace out.